Nice to see you again.
Assist him.
No, I can manage very nicely, thank you.
But you have access to the greatest source of knowledge in the universe.
Well, I do talk to myself sometimes, yes.
I mean...
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
They can travel along any form of broadcast wavelengths.
Well, I did get used to it. Even liked it at times.
Only a few have mastered the art.
Then more should. Put your best men on it immediately.
Load of junk.
Well, don't just stand there. Reconnect.
Commencing reconnection.
Here come the drums!
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, the ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who, the TV series, in completely random order. My name is Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and Chris and I are back.
Yay!
We're back.
Back on the random adventure.
No,
after a side quest or two.
After a side quest or two. We've had a couple of those in the Pull to Open canon. Should I call it that now?
Yes.
But yeah, Chris and I are a couple of, if you're new here, a couple of Doctor Who fans, a couple of journalists who've been covering the show and talking about the show for literally decades at this point. And we are delighting in our random journey throughout the canon of Doctor Who here.
Well, you say delighting, and this brings up an issue that I think we are discovering, Pete, that the randomizer that we use for our adventure, we'll get to how we randomize Doctor Who in the most random way possible. The randomizer kind of feels like it doesn't like us at the moment. Almost feels like it's trying to shake us off. Because 4 episodes ago, we were at the Tom Baker story with Daleks. No, not that one. The other one, Destiny of the Daleks, not Genesis. And
rarely in top 10 lists. Not like
we had some issues around the level of comedy in Tom Baker stories. Oh boy, did we ever not know what we were in for there. Then 3 episodes ago, we moved on to Orphan 55. Again, not really making many top 10 lists. The Jodie Whittaker story about climate change and us becoming monsters who breathe carbon dioxide in the future. 2 episodes ago, we went to a similarly dubious story called Kill the Moon from the Peter Capaldi era, in which the moon turns out to be a totally unscientific giant egg. And for our last adventure, we went to a William Hartnell story. Again, not even on most bottom 10 lists or top 10 lists, just kind of a nothing story about pirates, the smugglers.
The long-forgotten smugglers.
The long-forgotten smugglers. And from there, we got back into TARDIS, and I believe I asked the randomizer for a Viscount banger. To break the long series. Viscount Banger, the highest rating in the Pull to Open rating system, reserved for the most classic of classic stories, not from the classic series, but the best of the best. And it did not deliver, I think it's fair to say.
What? Don't reveal your rating.
I am so sorry. Well, I think it's fair to say it's not a Viscount banger in many people's lists, but it is the Tom Baker story from season 15, the very last serial of season 15, The Invasion of Time. Now, I don't know about you, Pete. Had you watched this before?
Yeah, I've seen it before. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
I have seen it before.
So for me, Invasion of Time was one of those that I was saving, for an appropriate moment, because it is sort of renowned for many things. Return to Gallifrey. Obviously, it's Leela's final story. It's the final story for K9 Mark 1. It's the follow-up to The Deadly Assassin, Where We Have Been. But it's also sort of renowned for being one of the first stories to really give us the inside of the TARDIS. And that is what I'd heard about it. That's why I knew about it. That's what I was associating it with. Sontarans chasing the Doctor through the TARDIS. I was really looking forward to seeing that. And I was so disappointed by the actual version. Oh, all I'm saying is... The randomizer, it really likes to mess with us.
So you hadn't seen it before. I got you.
I had not seen it
Okay.
before.
Cool. Well, like going back to your sort of recap of where we've been lately, I do feel you in that it seems like every time we've done an episode that we might call bad, or perhaps not a good example of Doctor Who, and we try to get the randomizer to get us something different, it's like, here, hold my regeneration Sisterhood of Karn elixir. You don't know bad, guys. And yeah, it's been a series of what we call, I guess, Ogrons, Professor Haters. And so we've learned a little bit about how not to make Doctor Who the last few times. But this is going to be an interesting one because I feel like we might have different thoughts and different ratings on this one. So this might be a little bit of a contentious one, which I'm looking forward to.
I think it's especially contentious for me because I love Tom Baker so much. Tom Baker is my Doctor. He was the first Doctor. You never forget your first. And this is full self-indulgent Tom Baker. Sorry. Save it for commentary,
guys. And by the way, if you want to fast forward to our in-depth commentary on the Invasion of Time, you go ahead and check the show notes right now, or scroll down on your YouTube app or your webpage, and you'll see very prominently in our notes the exact time where that commentary begins with TLDW, our plot summary. So if you want to cut right to that, go for it right now. But for everyone else, hey guys, it is time to enter the Pull to Open feedback loop. So guys, if you enjoy Pull to Open, our episode commentaries, our brain teasers of Doctor Who episode titles in the form of emojis, or just the randomness of our journey, we'd like to get you to encourage you right now to please leave a review or a rating in whatever podcast app you might be listening in. So these things, the reviews and ratings, they really do help the show. We love to sometimes read out reviews on air, and even better, if you can, share this podcast with a friend. Now, we had a review a few weeks ago, and it was entirely emoji titles of Doctor Who episodes, which is our signature thing. We love to go through almost pretty much every episode with that could be translated into emojis. And it's a little segment. We should get a name for this segment at some point. It's mostly the Chris Taylor Challenge, or I guess we'll call it the Emoji Challenge.
The emoji challenge.
Who? Yeah.
Emoji what? Like yeah.
Emoji what?
Into it.
Even better. Emoji what?
Emoji what?
And so I like to tease Chris with these. He doesn't look at the notes. He doesn't prep ahead of time. And we had, again, a bunch of them left by a super fan named Rowan, who goes by this handle X Cinematech on Apple Podcasts. And
Thank you,
we're going to paste these out. So we're gonna do one this week and one in subsequent weeks. So are you ready, sir?
I'm ready. The fact that you are doing TLDW this week makes me happy. That this is my only challenge. I'm good. I'm gonna enjoy sitting back in the next round. Except when it is, yeah. Okay. Except that I'm just a Doctor Who fan standing in front of thousands of Doctor Who fans getting an emoji title wrong. All right, let's do this.
All right, let's do it. All right, here it is. 2 emojis. First emoji is a clock with both hands pointed to the 12. Mm-hmm. And second emoji is a blue diamond.
Okay. Time diamonds, time stone, time crystal. I may not be wait, what you said the clock was pointed to midnight?
12. Yeah.
12, which could be midnight. Yeah. The planet of crystal. Yes. Hey.
Yeah. Actually, I felt like I gave you too much with diamond, because that was actually the name of the planet, I think. I could be wrong.
Right.
No,
I think it's
right. No, it was the planet name. I don't know. Something about diamond was in there, but it was like crystal.
Yeah. I think it was a planet called Midnight. But yes, it's always difficult with these emoji reviews to know if the writer is referring to the title or the content of the story. And here,
it's
clearly,
a little bit of both right here.
Yeah, which I like, which kind of throws you off a little bit more. But I got that one, and I feel like we do need to sort of keep a list of how many of these I've got, how many I've failed at. Just so I can sort of encourage myself to know that I'm on the right track. I do get these eventually. Maybe I need like 4 or 5 guesses for each item, but I get there. Yeah. I got to the planet Midnight.
We can keep adding columns in our Codex. And by the way, every single one of these emoji titles goes to the Codex, so you can check them out there, and they get credit. So if you submit one, we will link to your submission.
That's right. That Codex. That solid diamond codex that will be preserved for all time. You will be in it. Rowan is in it several times. Many of our other fans are. You can be too. So please send us your emoji stumpers. See if you can stump me with your stories.
All right, Stumpy. Moving on in the feedback loop. Guys, if you are listening on Spotify, little known fact, you can actually rate the show on your app, on your mobile app. So in addition to that, you know that every time we have an episode commentary, Chris and I each give a rating to the episode. And the Pull to Open rating system, which we will explain at the end of the show, has 5 ratings. You too can give your rating on Spotify. So we do it in the poll feature every week. You can go ahead and decide if the episode was a Viscount banger, a Dalek, an Ogron, or even a fixed point in time, whatever you think. And we'll gladly read the results out on a future episode. And we're going to do that right now for one of our, I guess, most controversial episodes that we've done, which has its lovers, certainly has its haters. It is Kill the Moon. And as you might recall, Chris, we both decided that was a Professor Hater. Not an Ogron. It was a double hater.
Not an Ogron. It was a double hater, and we did prevaricate on that a little bit. I think that certainly what pushed over the edge for me was with the end scenes with Danny Pink and with Clara officially leaving the Doctor and walking out of the TARDIS. That just made it more of a thing that was trying something new that we learned from, rather than just a complete mess and bad episode.
It was very ambitious. I liked the gumption of like, we're just going to give a completely new history of the moon, and we're just going to, upend a lot of other Doctor Who stories in a sense by doing that. But it didn't do it well. Didn't do it right. Didn't do it in a way that really, respected fans or anyone who knows anything about science. So unfortunately, it didn't do it very well, but I had to admire that. Okay, you went for it. You fell down. There was a better way to do that story, and I wouldn't mind seeing it. So had to do the hater, not the Ogron.
Right.
But
close run thing.
I'll tell you this: the fans, I guess they disagree with us a little bit. There were more people who thought it was an Ogron than a hater. So 42% of the folks who voted said this is an Ogron, guys.
Wow.
Nothing to redeem it. Let's forget about it.
Interesting. But also, we have 8%. 8% of you, dear Pull to Open listeners, said that Kill the Moon was a Viscount banger.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
You best of the best.
And another 8% said it was a Dalek. So it's like you had almost 20% said it was like a good episode, which is
Right. And another 8% says fixed point in time, which is generally that means it's a very rare rating, and it means that you cannot hate on it for whatever sentimental, nostalgic reason. Often it's one that you saw early on. Maybe it was your first Doctor Who and you got into it because of that. So 8% said. So yeah, it's actually a surprising result for the people who didn't. We've got 75% haters basically between the hater and the Ogron. and 25% loved it. That sounds about right in terms of just talking to people who like Doctor Who. Yeah, there are a surprising amount who can ignore the bad science, who can ignore the weirdness with the egg reappearing at the end and that sort of thing. And they like the ethical dilemma of it, which, stripped of all the other nonsense, is kind of interesting, right?
And probably are a little more inclined to go with it, right? Like have a little more suspension of disbelief, especially if you're new to Doctor Who. I could definitely see people who are new to the show seeing this and not getting that upset about it upsetting continuity, because you probably don't know about it, and you're just like, whatever, okay, the moon's an egg, this is kind of silly, but interesting.
We're gonna talk today with Invasion of Time about the question of Doctor Who and comedy and how much is too much. We talked about that with Destiny of the Daleks, and you could arguably, certainly if you are fresh to Doctor Who, see Kill the Moon as a bit of a comedy setup. Right, it's a really absurd premise that you almost have to be in that comedy frame of mind, which the show isn't, because it's so dark with Clara's dilemma there and Clara's feeling of abandonment from the Doctor. So the story itself does not go in a comedy direction, but maybe you can get over the science trouble if you're seeing Doctor Who as it is sometimes seen as a comedy. I could see that being the reason and a good segue into what we're going to talk about today. But
good
in the
stuff.
meantime,
okay. In the meantime, guys, that's closing the book on Kill the Moon. But we are going to reopen the book on something else, and it's thanks to our friends on YouTube. So if you don't know, we're on YouTube. We're at youtube.com/pull-to-open. Great place to follow the show. Even if you already follow us on a podcast app, following us on YouTube really helps us out as well. And you get to see us and all the fun things we have in our background like I have today. And there's actually great discussion on YouTube too. So the most recent podcast we did was one on a bit of a side trip about companions and what counts as a companion. So because you have people taking rides in the TARDIS, you have people in multiple episodes. Some are good, some are bad. There have been definitely interesting companions who have experimented in that realm. So once you start to think about all these criteria that sort of are around, like who's a companion, who isn't, you start to realize it's more complicated than just, they're in a couple of stories and they're in they take a trip in the TARDIS. It's just, there's more to it than that, clearly. So we did the research as much as we could anyway, and we came up with a whole system that has it's basically a point system. So if you DMV style, you basically, if you go with a ride with the Doctor, you get so many points. If you travel in time, you get so many points. If he actually invites you to travel with him, you get a lot of points. That's like the equivalent of a passport at the DMV. So all of that is to the good. We thought we had a good system. I think we'd still have a good system, but we had a commenter on YouTube point something out to us, and I'd like to read it right here. So it's from a friend of the pod. It's Nathan Smith. And he says, I'm surprised you all didn't cover one of the most famous edge cases to the point that most criteria make an explicit exception for her, Dr. Liz Shaw. By your qualifications, she gets at least 4 points of being in an entire season. I want to say her working alongside the Doctor for a year should count for either an invitation by the Doctor or by a companion, namely the Brig. Although I'm unclear if that counts, since the TARDIS herself was out of commission that entire time. I love that Nathan calls the TARDIS herself, which of course it's herself.
Of course.
I mean, come on.
Of course she is. Yes. Full name, sexy.
So he finishes off the comment with, I suppose for the sake of fairness, I should acknowledge that when the Doctor believes he's gotten the TARDIS working again at the end of Inferno, he is prepared to say goodbye to Liz then and there. But come the next episode, he's upset that she went off to Cambridge. So I think we can reasonably infer that that moment in Inferno was just a fly by the seat of your pants. Get away from Earth. Finally. Exhilaration. Okay.
Yes.
I'll start off by just acknowledging the last bit, and I totally agree in that it just makes no sense that the Doctor was just going to take off in the TARDIS console without the TARDIS, and just, I mean, maybe you could infer that he's going to go back to where the TARDIS is and plug it in or whatever. But I think we're all agreed that like he was just in a like as the Brigadier says, running off in a fit of pique, I believe, and so he would have collected himself and figured things out if he didn't just land in the rubbish tip anyway. So that's that. But this is 100% right that our system, which mostly relies on taking a trip in the TARDIS, traveling in time, and being in more than one story, does not serve Liz Shaw very well. That serves almost all of sort of your regular companions, right? Like whether you have an invitation or not. But we should say you need 10 points. You could go ahead and check the show notes for the previous episode to see the entire system. Yeah. But you need 10 points to be a companion. Traveling in time gets you 2. More than one story gets you 4. And taking a trip in the TARDIS gets you 4. So for the vast majority of companions, that's all you need, whether or not the Doctor actually invites you. In this case, I mean, because he's stranded on Earth, it's a very tough thing for Liz. Fortunately, Joe Grant, did a little more with the TARDIS once the Time Lord sort of got a little more involved in bossing the Doctor around. So that wasn't really a problem for her, and she obviously was much more long running as a companion. So she ended up even crossing over into the non-exile part of the Third Doctor run. So no problem for Joe, but for Liz, it's tough.
Liz, it is unfortunate, and I will say that I did bring this up almost immediately after we recorded that episode, because Liz is an edge case because she's part of the unit crew, but all of the rest of the unit crew that we know as unit, the Brig, Benton, Yates, they carry it on. They're in more than just one season. Caroline Johns, of course, just famously there for one season. And I did suggest, Pete, that we add a criteria to allow Liz to be listed as a companion. And that was, we know the Doctor is a scientist. We know the Doctor loves to do experiments. In all of his nerve regenerations, the Doctor loves to do science-y experiments. And Liz Shaw, like that is one of her primary functions, do experiments alongside the Doctor. And she does that. And I suggested the idea that if we have 1 point, if we add 1 point for every time you do an experiment with the Doctor, not only would that put Liz Shaw over the edge, it would also, I feel, like every time a scientist is only in the show for like 1 week, one story, and they do an experiment alongside the Doctor, there always feels like a little bit of bonding going on there, right? I often think of was it Pyramid at the End of the World, where there's that, the Doctor bonds with a bunch of scientists and that. Where they're releasing the the whole thing that's going to destroy the world, that bacteria or whatever. Yeah, that's true. And he really there's bonding. There's even flirting. Like I feel maybe flirting with the Doctor could be an extra point, but like I love the idea that this rating, if we add this rating, it would get so many people at least on the board, so many scientists at least on the board. With the Doctor, with 1 point or 2 points, it would be nice for them. It'd be nice. They're toiling their entire lives in relative obscurity, doing the good work of science, occasionally accidentally releasing bacteria into the wild that will destroy the entire planet, but mostly doing good scientific work. And it'd be kind of nice for them. It, might encourage more kids to get into STEM if we have that as our criteria.
Yeah, it's not bad. Do an experiment with the Doctor. I guess you just sort of have to define what an experiment is and what that means. How many points would you award that? 2?
I think one per experiment. I think over the course,
you can get more than once. That's a big exception to our rules.
It's a Liz Shaw exception. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So 1 per experiment. So she's done. I mean, how many has she done then? So she did 1 in Spearhead because they decided they had to figure out a way to sort of jam the signal, and she uses it. She actually uses it at the end to weaken the octopus or whatever. And she certainly works on the cure to the plague in the Silurian. So it's at least 2. And
and Inferno, like the experiment with the TARDIS console, she's definitely assisting with that.
That would get her 3. So let's look at the system, right? So she's in more than one story. She automatically gets 4. But she doesn't really take a trip in the TARDIS, and she doesn't travel in time. So she doesn't get any of those points. So even with if she gets 3 or even 4 experiments, she's probably only at 7 or 8. So here's what I would say to sort of push her over the edge. And I think this isn't quite an exception, but it is a stretch. Is that because Liz is in both dimensions in Inferno, you could argue she sort of takes a trip in the TARDIS. Like she doesn't, but she sort of does because she's in both places.
We could make the criteria: has the Doctor met an evil version of you?
It could be.
Has the Doctor met a mirror world, randomly fascist version of this companion?
Yeah. The only other way to do it is, as Nathan suggested in his comment, in like, do you essentially infer an invitation? And you could infer it from their first meeting in Spearhead from Space.
Yes, the Doctor invites her in to explore his lab.
Right, exactly. And there's a bit of dialogue with him, the Brigadier, and Liz, and it seems clear that because Liz is there and he has another scientific mind to, essentially bounce ideas off of, he is a little quicker to agree to the Brigadier's deal. That you should be a scientific advisor here. So in other words, like there's an invitation that is accepted between the Doctor and the Brigadier, with Liz as kind of part of the deal, which again, there's a lot of contorting there to say that that's an invitation for the Doctor and Liz to sort of work together and do adventures together. But it's defensible, I think. So we either do the experiments thing or the invitation thing, either one. Well, if you're doing the experiments thing, you also necessitate interpreting Inferno as a trip in the TARDIS. Yes.
Okay. Well, we don't want to turn this into another Who is a Companion episode. So we'll throw those ideas out there. Please let us know what you think. Comment on that YouTube video, or just hail us directly at one of our social channels.
I'm going to come down to one side of this. Just because I like things simple, I'm going to go like, I'm contorting the Spearhead exchange as an invitation, and then that makes it simple. Though I do admire your STEM idea, and that like let's give enough points for experiments. I'd love to look at the history of the show and see how many people would at least get those points. Like you said, Pyramid at the End of the World. There was also Planet of the Dead. There was that sort of quirky dude. So there's a bunch of people who sort of are inching their way toward Companion by doing that. So it's not bad.
I like the extra emphasis on science, but let us know what you think, dear listener. I'm sure you have opinions, and I'm sure we will continue this conversation in future episodes. But we should probably blast through.
We might continue it on TikTok.
Yes.
So feel free to leave a comment there about our system at Pull to Open, all one word, on TikTok, where we try to post videos there almost every day. Or you could drop us a line on Twitter at Pull to Open 63, which is also our handle on Instagram and Facebook. So Pull to Open 63 on all those platforms. Go ahead, leave a comment, drop us a line, and let's chat.
All right. Well, is it time, Pete? Is it time for the part that you're dreading?
Getting about that time. I'm dreading it a little bit. I will say that. So we're here, guys.
Time for time. And time for TLDW, Too Long Didn't Watch Too Long Doctor Who. Definitely too long, I would say, in the case of the 6-parter. And I do have to admit that I forgot that it was 6 parts when we chose this. I was like, Six-parters.
Choose anything, dude.
Yeah, when I'm including the randomizer in the we here.
Oh, of course.
Yes, the royal we chose this episode randomly, bestowed this episode upon us. I'd forgotten. Yeah, I thought that they were done with six-parters by this point, but no.
Oh, you know what? I think this is the last one, isn't it?
Ah.
Or Shada? No, Shada was 6, right? Shada wasn't made, but it was supposed to be 6, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
Which may have been part of the reason. Yes, this one also, had industrial problems like the ones that plagued Shada.
Yeah. Although, like that again, that first season of Colin Baker throws everything off, right? Because you could argue the Two Doctors is a 6-parter, even though it's a 3-parter. So
yes,
yeah.
All right, we're prevaricating again. It is time.
I'm doing a good job, right?
Pete is going to summarize. It is your turn this week to summarize the story of Invasion of Time. But because it is 6 parts, we allot 30 seconds per classic episode. So you get a whole 3 minutes to explain what the hell is going on here. And I think I'm pretty sure of myself, but I'm also saying I'm very glad I'm not in the TLDW shoes this week. How are you feeling, Pete? You confident?
I'm feeling okay. I'm zooming out on this one. You know what I mean? Like this is a little bit of a preview of my commentary. You got to zoom out to really figure out what this is and appreciate it. So I think I'll still need the full 3 minutes, but I don't expect to get into many rabbit holes because I'm just gonna cruise right over them. That's my plan.
That's the thing. I feel like summarizing in 1 minute would be easy. Summarizing in 2 minutes would be easy. Summarizing in 3 minutes, like you're gonna have to start to introduce some of these weird rabbit holes. Talk about swimming pools and brick walls and weird chairs and corridors. But we'll get to that. Pete, you have all your tabs closed. Your screen is glowing an unearthly red, which is fabulous. I love this.
It's the Gallifrey sky. What I'm staring at.
There we go. Perfect for this episode. And okay, so the official pull to open summary of Invasion of Time in 3 minutes or less starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Doctor's making a deal with these aliens, and he's basically signing a contract saying he's going to work for them, and they're going to give him essentially the power of the Time Lord. So he goes back to the TARDIS, tells Leela to be quiet. He materializes his TARDIS on Gallifrey, and they basically can detect him coming. The Chancellor Guard comes to arrest him. He comes out. But then he insists on going to the Chancellor's quarters and saying, like, I claim the presidency
30 seconds.
of the High Council of the Time Lords. And strangely, it's not contested. It's a sort of a carryover from the Deadly Assassin when he basically did the same thing to get out of being charged. So he banishes Leela, his companion, and says, get out, and she needs to go to the wilderness outside of Gallifrey. There's a Castellan who is just sort of power hungry, and he just is like, okay, you're the president now, I'm going to suck up to you. Barusa, who is his old friend and mentor, sort of challenges him, doesn't like what the Doctor's doing, but he reluctantly goes along with it. But it turns out the Doctor has been planning to betray the Time Lords and have these people he was making a deal with earlier. They're called the Vardans, and they're kind of these weird energy creatures. And they come, and the Doctor is, basically destroyed some of the Gallifrey's defenses to allow them to come in and take charge. So everyone's like, what the hell? And so now the Vardans are in charge, but the Castellan, who is this wormy, slimy guy, basically is like, all right, well, the Vardans in charge. I'm gonna go with them. And because they're turning Gallifrey into this weird sort of fascist place, he loves it. He's kind of like, yeah, I can suddenly round up people and arrest them, and this is cool. Leela's been banished to the outside. She hooks up with the Shobogans, who are these like spear chucking sort of misfits who have to turn their back on Gallifreyan lifestyle and the Time Lords. But she sort of rallies them. It's like, we have to go and we have to stop these invaders, because this is going to be bad for everybody. So what actually has happened, though, the Doctor has used K9 to take all these artifacts from Gallifrey and use them once the force field's down, and he has lulled the Vardans into thinking he's working for them, and they fully materialize. The K9 finds their home planet. The Doctor beams them back there and just time loops the whole planet. Clearly, he's thought these people are way too dangerous to leave not time looped, I guess, and they're gone. And so the invasion's been thwarted. Doctor looks like he's going to be getting rid of Castellan and everything, but it turns out the Sontarans have invaded now, and they've used this hole in the force field that the Doctor's created to basically land their invasion force. So then there's this whole crazy back and forth where they're going to get him in his own TARDIS, and the Doctor has built this thing called the DMAT gun, which is a super weapon that dematerializes basically opponents. And it's powered by the great T that he gets from Barusa. He uses it against the Sontarans and dematerializes them, and then he leaves Leela and K9 on Gallifrey.
And opens K9 Mark II, yes. Or at least wheels out the box of K9 Mark II and completely breaks the fourth wall by laughing maniacally at the camera. Wow, that was interesting. You definitely, see, this is what I'm saying. With 3 minutes, when you got those acres of time, it really is. It's difficult to kind of fit it all in segments of time. Yes, you focused a lot on the Vardans there, who kind of are almost a 4-episode distraction to get us to the Sontarans in the last 2 episodes. Should we maybe start there by talking about Vardans versus Sontarans? Or should let's just set the scene. Let's set the scene a little bit.
So I want to elaborate a bit. Mm-hmm. You'll go ahead. Go ahead, set the scene. You do.
I was going to say, so this is 1978. And it's the last story of the season, and there was a story that was commissioned, which was about cat people on Gallifrey, which really just puts me in mind of the latest Saturn Master. Last time I saw you, you were a cat person. Man's allowed to experiment.
It took him a while to get to the cat people.
Yes.
The final season of the classic series.
Yes. In the original scripts, yes, the Gallifreyans were allowed to experiment as well. But it was kind of cobbled together at the last minute. It was beset by industrial action. It was beset by the fact that Tom Baker is just sort of thinks he can do it all on his own at this point. Doesn't like the character of Leela. He and Louise Jameson not getting on. Louise Jameson wants to leave. The writers still think that they can talk her out of it. It's a whole mess. It just, they didn't get the places to film that they wanted. The script has so many holes you could fly a Sontaran battle through it. And they wanted Robert Holmes to write this. They wanted the great Robert Holmes, who had written The Deadly Assassin, to write this as the sequel. And he said, no, sorry, I want a bit more distance from Doctor Who, but you know what you should do? Make it a 4-episode and 2-episode structure. So it's the Vardans for the first 4 episodes who are invading Gallifrey, and then the twist at the end of the 4th episode, which really feels like, you're wrapping up a classic 4-episode story, and then, oh no, all of a sudden, what's this? The Sontarans are in Gallifrey, and that's the final 2 episodes. So that part is Robert Holmes. Alas, none of the rest of it is. So
so all of that's true. I would just add on the David Weir treatment. I guess he made a whole script of whatever the cat people thing was. So according to Graham Williams, there were sort of a mixed reasons why they rejected it. One was that it was just too expensive. It just looked the way he wrote it. It was just there's no way we could ever film this.
Supposedly there was a scene with a stadium full of cat people. That's sort of famously the point at which they realized, no, there's no way we can do this. Of course, now you can totally do that with CGI.
Oh, easy. And but he also said that, and I think this is probably the real reason, it was that he just didn't get Doctor Who, the beats of the show, whatever the structure of it was, and you kind of know what Doctor Who is by living it or working at it for a while, and you kind of have to trust the producer and the script editor. If they say this just doesn't feel like a Doctor Who episode, then that probably isn't. That said, I think they were less inclined to experiment back then, and particularly in that period when they were pulling back from the Philip Hinchcliffe era, which was sort of getting bold and gothic horror-esque, and we're like, no, we want to be a little safer, essentially, is what they decided to do. Probably with the input from the BBC. We're getting skittish about the horror movie vibes. So the cat people thing would probably pass the cut today in some way, for both reasons, the budget and story. And but that said, this was the result of all the things you said, and you're totally right. Like it's clear, you can tell it's rushed. You can tell it's probably not the best choices that they wanted to make. But all that said, like my overall impression of the Invasion of Time, like if you zoom out on the story and the structure that they're trying to do, it's actually really compelling. Like I think it's super fun at this point in the story, in the series, to explore more of Gallifrey. And this, I think, more than even the Deadly Assassin in some ways, almost humanizes Gallifrey and makes it this obviously dysfunctional society, but also that there are a couple of alien races with designs on stealing the power of the Time Lords. That's just awesome. That's a smart thing, and you could tell like that idea has obviously carried over into the new series with the Time War and the Daleks, and has served sort of the basis of the new series mythology. Here you see this sort of beginning of like Gallifrey, not just this godlike player, on directing both sides of a cosmic chessboard. It's also a target, which I thought was just a super awesome idea.
And it does flesh out the notion that the division between the upper class Time Lords and the very primitive Shobogans on Gallifrey. I will say it was a missed opportunity, and I think that this is very interesting to talk about in the context of the Timeless Child, which is that the original idea, and I do wish that they put this in the script, the original idea was that it was going to establish that the Time Lords were not Gallifreyan, that they had settled on Gallifrey to, they built the citadel there in exchange for protection, in exchange for, allowing the native inhabitants to live long lives. And, this could have sort of explored the negative consequences of allowing some weird aristocratic race to set up a citadel on your planet. But that would have been very interesting, I think, especially now we know that the Doctor is not of Gallifrey herself/himself. That seemed to come out of left field in the Timeless Children for a lot of people. However, if it had been established that the Time Lords themselves were just Aravistes to Gallifrey, then I think that might have put a different cast on it and suggested that, there's more to their story. It goes back way further. It's not necessarily connected to this one dusty planet with the weird trees and the sunsets and the red sky and all of that. What do you think, Pete? Should they have included that?
I honestly don't think it adds as much as to this particular story anyway, as you might think, as much as it does add to the mythology of Gallifrey. And there's so much that we don't really know. I mean, obviously there's been tons of speculative stuff that's been written and bridging between episodes, and a lot of less canonical adventures that have tried to flesh out Gallifrey a bit. Lungbarrow being one of the which is a novel that sort of goes into the Doctor's history on Gallifrey quite a bit, is very notable. But you think about Gallifrey, right? And it's essentially this citadel and some stuff. And you kind of wonder, like, well, wait a minute, how did that even happen, right? Like, if you want to just protect Vord from our own planet, here's Earth. We'll say we develop time travel and we become the Time Lords. Would we then, essentially shrink our whole society down to this one capital? And presumably, it's got Time Lord technology, so it's bigger on the inside. But at the same time, like, why wouldn't you use the rest of the planet? Why wouldn't you? I don't get it. So that's never really it's not even really answered here, but at least here you get this sort of fleshed out stuff. Like the Shobogans are mentioned, in The Deadly Assassin, and you're not even quite sure what they are. You just feel like, oh, there's some sort of rabble, I guess,
Yeah.
because they're dismissed by, I think it's Spandrel, like, oh, vandalism is something the Shobogans do, those rabble rousers. And now we see them, and it's very interesting. There's people who have very consciously like, no, we don't like this lifestyle, this Time Lord. I'm just, above technology and above everything, and I just sit and observe. And they're like, it actually makes total sense that you'd have this tiny subset of people that are just like, I'm rejecting. I want not just I'm rejecting that. I want to get back to my primal nature.
Back to the land, man. They're Time Lord hippies, basically, is what's established here. And interesting, we also get little insights into. I'm going to try to remain mostly positive about Invasion of Time for most of this episode. We get little insights into Time Lord society through Rodan, who I don't think is a character you mentioned in the TLDW, because she's not really that necessary. She's sort of, Leela's friend and then the Doctor's friend. Almost a companion because she takes a trip in the TARDIS. And she's a Time Lord, and she's the one who sort of really is the fish out of water with the Shobogans. And one of the things she does is sort of present her little pocket full of pills, which is apparently what the Time Lords eat. I'm not sure how that works with getting enough fiber in their diet, but yeah, that's a sort of very 60s, 70s sci-fi trope, right? In the future, we're all going to just subsist on a diet of pills. Well, that sort of might explain why the Time Lords are so little fun. They don't really have feasts. They don't sit down around the dinner table ever. There's not even that moment of human warmth to them. They just consume pills. So that's an interesting insight.
Well,
I kind of like
Rodan.
that.
I like Rodan because she's trying, and you learn a lot from her, right? You learn about the transduction barriers. You learn about, like, she has an important line where she talks about the Time Lords in the third person, which indicates there's more striations to Gallifreyan society than are just the Time Lords and the Shobogans. There's some sort of Gallifreyan commoner that isn't a Time Lord, but isn't some refugee or underclass. They're just, or I guess arguably, like, they're just maybe middle class. I don't know. But they do, and this happens in other episodes too, that the Time Lords are referred to as essentially the ruling class of Gallifrey. They're not, and it's not just the High Council, but it is like being a Time Lord is you have the houses, and you have the funny hat wear and the neck wear and all that stuff, so you can do all that. So yeah, you're getting, like, again, more of what this society is about. Rodan talks about how she's there to kind of keep an eye on ships passing by, I guess, that are pretty close, and just making sure that they're aware and observing, and
She's
sure
a one woman NORAD.
Well, and she's not really worried that they're going to do anything because of what this Time Lord technology, the transduction barriers, which I kind of wish they would have referred to more in things like, and maybe they did and I missed it, but there, Day of the Doctor. And there was that one prequel episode or webisode that sort of talks about the Daleks breaking through some kind of barrier.
Yeah, the sky trenches and all that, Arcadia.
Yeah, so it's a little bit, and they again, you scale up sci-fi in these ways of, like, I remember in that thing they put there's like 50 layers or something in here. I like this better, that there's a transduction barrier that just kind of works against force itself almost, right? Like, you could never shoot through it, no matter how much firepower you have. I like that as a sci-fi idea, and the only way to get through it, of course, is have an inside man, which is the Doctor in this case. So kind of more ideas like that are just on this otherworldly sci-fi level, where you can't even just apply your natural thinking to it. You have to work around it. I like that as sort of, that's what the Time Lords have figured out, that they're above all this stuff, right? Or at least they think they are.
It's definitely a story that Yeah, yes, indeed. It's definitely a story that kind of pokes holes, way more holes even than the Deadly Assassin did in Time Lord society and in the way that they have it set up. They are shown to be sort of supremely self-confident, arrogant, and unable to understand the potential threat to their planet because they've been safe for so long. But also, the Doctor shows how the political system can be entirely subverted if he returns to reclaim his presidency, which is something that he did to get out of trouble in the Deadly Assassin. And there's nothing to stop him, which is very
I also
interesting.
love that the Time Lords haven't even gotten around to getting another president, right? Like, I love what that says about them. Like, they're just this utterly impotent, feckless society that just, oh, we'll get around to that. Like, we weren't planning for any of this, so someday we'll fill that position, but we're going to have to go through a bunch of hoops, and no one steps up. There's no like real leader there who's just going to be like, well, we got to do this, and let's make some things happen. It's like, no, because that's just sort of been weeded out of their society by their lifestyle.
Yeah, not even Castellan Kellner, who you would think would be the kind of grasping opportunist, but no, he just wants to be servile to a Time Lord dictator.
I think he also, like, he's such a worm. You know what I mean? Like, you can't think. Like, I got to think just politically, people wouldn't go for it. You know what I mean? People know who he is, but they think he's no threat. Just again, because of the nature of their society, he's not going to be able to do anything unless he has a strongman dictator that essentially he can get behind, right? Like the thing about that, by the way, I love that guy's performance. What's his name again?
Milton Johns. Yeah,
Milton Johns. He was perhaps the best thing about the whole episode, and he reminded me so much of the snake in the Robin Hood cartoon. He reminded me so much of it. I thought I had to look it up and see if it was the same actor, because he actually sounds like him, and it's not.
He definitely he's wonderful at playing that type. I mean, kind of character for which the word unctuous was invented. I mean, it just kind of so oily, slimy, and just overly servile to whoever he's leading. Whether that whoever's leading him, whether that be Tom Baker or a bunch of aluminum foil. Projected, which is all you see of the Vardans, unfortunately. But I'm not going to get into that. That's the negative side of the review. Let's stay on the positive side, and I will say that I really liked Tom Baker's performance, especially in the first 2 episodes, where you don't really know, and that this is sort of the whole idea. It looks like the Doctor has gone a bit mad. It looks like the Doctor is in cahoots with mystery alien race. Again, unfortunate that they're just a bunch of aluminum foil in front of a CSO camera, but yeah, this is sort of the time of the show to play with that. We can play with that. Like, we're in the Doctor's 4th regeneration. He's sort of been a cozy, cuddly kind of Doctor, with if a little bit mad up until then. But there have always been these moments where you're like, who is this guy really? You see that with the Hartnell Doctor a lot. You see it a bit with Pertwee's Doctor. We just mentioned one of the episodes, Inferno, one of the stories, Inferno, where he just doesn't like his Earthbound companions, and he's trying desperately to get away from it, and he doesn't want to take any of them with him, and he just is mad and upset and arrogant, and here is possibly the last time in the show you can sort of get away with it. I feel like after this, like, you couldn't see Davison doing this, right? Maybe you could see Colin Baker doing this, but
I was just thinking, like, you do see Colin Baker doing it in Mind Warp, right? So, as you were talking there about Baker being off and a bit mad, and you're not really sure which side he's on, that definitely Mind Warp came to mind. And of course, in that episode, sort of the lines are really blurred, and we'll get there when we get there. But here, I thought you're dead on. Like, Tom Baker, adjusts his performance just right in those first couple of episodes, and he's like more histrionic. He's definitely nuts. Like he's just sort of even physically just sort of changing direction and doing strange things in the middle of scenes. And a lot of it's played for comedy, which isn't always bad. I mean, I think it's actually quite good. I really love the bit where he and Andred both have jelly babies, and it's kind of mimicking him, and they're just kind of like, oh yeah, here you go, take the bag, which is again another mad thing you just do. Here you go, I'm just doing this now. And
this is again a Time Lord society that doesn't have proper food; they just eat with pills. Yes, they're going to see a jelly baby as a delicacy. As a nice moment.
And I think as a viewer, you're thinking like, okay, either he's really up to something, or he's been sort of perhaps has been manipulated. His brain is being like baked or brainwashed or something, and you're not sure. And then you get that cathartic moment. I think it's in episode 3 where he's looking around his office and he's like, "You've got lead everywhere. Did you do it? Did you do what I asked?" And Bruce is like, "Yes, we did 1,000 times. Yes, we did it." And he's like, "Oh, then at last we can talk." And then finally, it's like, "Oh yeah, he's a good guy. Yay!" And
the lead lining, by the way, could easily also serve as a function of like why he's acting a bit mad, given what we now know about lead and its ability to affect the human brain. A lead-lined room, that part doesn't necessarily age well.
Yeah, and again, it's all zoomed out. It makes sense. Zoomed in, I could pick at this all day. Particularly, the main thing I would pick about the lead room is that how would the Vardans not know it's a lead room? Or at the very least, suddenly realize they can no longer read the Doctor's surface thoughts, which is apparently why he's been acting mad, right? He's been just trying to distract them with all his goofiness while still trying to keep his secret plan secret. But wouldn't they know when they suddenly realize, like, hold on a second, I can't read the Doctor anymore. Hey, wait a minute, that room, I can't read anyone in that room. Let's get busted to that room because this is not good for us, for our invasion plans. So it's the whole thing like with Superman, right? Well, I'll just create a lead room to make sure Superman can't see what I mean. Well, he's going to see there's a lead room somewhere. He's probably
exactly. He might think that something's up.
He might throw that into the sun or something. Like, come on, no. Don't do that.
Yeah. The Vardans are kind of one of the more unfortunate elements of this. I really wish they'd taken Robert Holmes's 4-episode, 2-episode division and flipped it, as Holmes himself often did. As in, just have the Vardans be the threat for the first 2 episodes, then flip it and make it the Sontarans.
Oh, I thought you meant like the Sontarans invade first and then the Vardans.
First, yeah. No, I mean, unless you get better costumes for the Vardans, that might work.
Here's the thing. I disagree on the physicality of the Vardans, because even though, yes, it's sort of bad CSO tinfoil, it's so unexpected in my mind that you just, you're not really quite sure what these things are, because they're, I believe in the first episode, it looks like they're in these chairs, right? These weird cone head shaped chairs that are facing the Doctor, and you're like, okay, I guess there's people there. So, but then when they materialize, you're kind of like, that's it? They're these goofy little crinkly things. But I like the idea of weird looking stuff. One, it's totally unexpected, but also like they pack a punch. Like right away, they zap someone who tries to zap them or something, and they assert themselves. So you're like, oh, like I like that subversion of expectations in a sense. Like they're just weird, goofy energy things, but we have to respect them. Star Trek did this a lot, with these sort of energy beings. I mean, if you remember the episode Day of the Dove, it's just this glowy thing that's wandered around the Enterprise, but it's the mastermind, it's the master manipulator. So I like that. I also really like the bit where they materialize and they're just dudes, just goofy looking dudes and goofy looking helmets, and you're just like, wait a minute, they're just guys, which again is another thing I like that idea. Like, oh, why were we scared of them? Well, they're still powerful, but they're just goofy looking dudes in helmets, and again, you're just constantly being misdirected around, and like your expectations are flipped over multiple times, which I just love it.
There is one of the, I mean, you do sort of have to get around a lot of questions of like, yeah, they're sitting in chairs at the start. There's also a point where they're sitting in a chair on Gallifrey when Castellan Kellner is talking to the one. He's literally talking to this tinfoil overlay that's sitting down in a chair. So, yeah, which reminds me of one of my favorite tweets about Star Wars, which is my favorite bit of Star Wars is where the ghost gets tired and sits on a log. Talking about Obi-Wan Return of the Jedi, of course.
If you watch on the DVD, you have the option to turn on CGI effects, and the Vardans look completely different. So they essentially look like shimmering humanoid shapes, and even though it looks more modern, I like it less. I prefer sort of the crinkly, tinfoily Vardans just because of all the subversion of expectations that I just talked about. I will say though, when the other effects they give, which is the staser bolts are more clear, K9's energy weapon is better, and the Matrix stuff where he puts on the crown, there's a little more of an effect there. All that is very good. I prefer those. But the Vardans themselves, I like that they have this weirdness to them about their appearance, and then that strange thing that happens because honestly, they don't even look humanoid. They just look like shrouded things. They almost look like Tholians, again, to give another sort of Star Trek reference. And then when they materialize as humans, you're almost not really expecting it, whereas sort of the humanoid shape kind of gives it away.
Interesting. I didn't know there was a Star Wars-esque special edition there on the DVD, which is I'm trying to counter every one of your Star Trek references with a Star Wars reference, which I think is warranted here because we should say that this was the story that was on TV screens when Star Wars arrived in the UK. It was the beginning of 1978, so it had taken that long from May 1977, which we all know when Star Wars came out. Taken that long to come to the UK, but it was finally there and in full force. And the BBC actually made a very successful sale to, I believe, to PBS, using the Invasion of Time as kind of a starting point, as kind of their calling card. Because of the success of Star Wars, they were like, "Hey, you guys need more science fiction. Here's some science fiction," which happened a lot. I know this from writing a history of Star Wars. Like there was sort of this immediate rush in 1978 to get anything you could that was science fiction on the screen, in TV and in movies, and it didn't matter what quality it was.
And they said, we've got 14 years of this show. Well, most of it. Some of it's long gone, but about 8.
Maybe. Yeah, we got some stuff. Maybe not all the stuff you want, and maybe not of the quality you want. But hey, it's sci-fi. The kids will love it. Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think of other good things. Like, the Tom Baker performance. I will say, one thing about the Tom Baker performance. You do sort of have to take the rough with the smooth here. Like, if you like him at his grinning madcap, not really sure what side he's on best, you have to accept him at his fourth wall breaking worst, which is not just the very end where he laughs at the camera, but also like he's thrown in lines about not even the sonic screwdriver can save me now, which feels like a Tom Baker ad lib, even if it isn't.
And basically almost turns to camera. Like he's not quite looking right in the lens, but he's very much like just slightly off. Like, and yeah, there's definitely goofy stuff. There's the joke about the most useless thing is a lock with a voice print or something, which is the voice print code, which sounds like something a middle schooler would come up with. And there's a bunch of that. You're totally right. I think he's very, very good in this, but he is given too much rope. And it's probably because, again, Graham Williams was just desperate to put something up. There was all that stuff. I'm not sure how much he and Louise Jameson really didn't get on, but there was, he wanted to do more himself. they let him do it, and a lot of it doesn't really land that well.
And Tom Baker, I mean, we know from The Deadly Assassin that Tom Baker in that story was kind of asking for to be companionless, to say that, hey, I can show that I can just do this by myself. And he actually suggested after the Invasion of Time, because there is that moment where, like, the Venus flytrap, there's like a Venus flytrap, like giant plant that eats. Is it? Right. They eat one of the Sontarans, right?
And trap one of the Sontarans. I think he actually gets out.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay. So seeing that, Tom Baker suggested that he could do the whole of the next season with a small version of that plant on his shoulder. Like, he,
All right,
the new companion. I know, right? The new companion is Seymour from Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah, I can't take that seriously. And that I'm sure he was kidding. Like, if he wasn't, okay, like, I think he was on something. But that's a bit goofy. But yeah, I get it. Like, he had to be reined in, and luckily he was. So they ended up going with Romana in the Key to Time. There was some rumor, I think, that they were going to bring back Rodan.
That is a rumor. A rumor is that Rodan was the sort of the template for the character that became Romana. That has, I believe, been
mostly debunked.
Soundly debunked. Yes.
Yeah. So, they weren't actually going to get her back.
But she is kind of similar. You can see why that myth started. She's definitely. There's not that much daylight between the two characters.
That's true.
At least not between her and Romana 1.
Yeah. So on the positive things, again, I really like the structure of the misdirection with the Vardans being the big bad, and then you think it's a 4-parter, and then the Sontarans come in. What I would have liked to see is a little more teasing of that than just the 2 shots, I believe, of the Sontaran space cruiser. And you're not even quite sure what it is, but you sort of know, something's happening. And I think they could have killed 2 birds with one stone, supposedly, with the way I would fix this, which is that in episode 1, the Doctor signed some contract with the Vardans. And it's unfortunately never referred to again, that you sign this thing and somehow that's enforceable or whatever, right? Like, it's just the thing he does that just to sort of set up the story. But what would have been cool is if maybe in episode 5 or 6, Storr, the Sontaran leader, makes some reference back to the contract, and it had some meaning beyond just trying to sort of set the stage in episode 1. And, maybe even the Vardans could refer to it a couple times in the preceding episodes, and that they have backers of some kind, and just hinted at least. You don't really even get much of that. They just really fixated on what the Doctor's doing all the time. So then when the Sontarans come out, it's a little too jarring. It's like, I love the twist that it's a double invasion, but I would have loved it. They should have set it up a little more. Again, it's all comes down to, I think, the rushed script, and if they had time, they could have put in a little more. But in my special edition in my head, there's a little more there, particularly with the contract.
You could have flagged it a little bit more, but you're making me realize yet another brain twisting what WTF moment in this whole thing. Yeah, the Doctor signs a contract to with the bad guys to, like, how is that enforceable? What court are you going to go to? Hey, the Doctor said he was going to invade Gallifrey with us, but he fooled us, and he built a lead-lined room, and it clearly states here in paragraph 4, subsection C, you're not to build a lead-lined room to keep our thoughts out, man. What the hell? You're supposed to be evil, according to this contract. How do you enforce a contract of evil? I don't know. Maybe this is a whole new Doctor Who space lawyer spin-off.
I mean, it's the Shadow Proclamation spin-off. Everybody's got to go before the court there in the Jadoon ultimately make their call, I guess.
I almost kind of want to see a Dalek lawyer spin-off. You sign this contract agreeing to be exterminated at a later date. This contract is enforceable. Yeah,
it's a bit silly, for sure.
the more you pick at Invasion of Time, the more that you can find. I will say,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I will say, like we've not talked about Louise Jameson enough, I think, because Leela is great. Leela is a great companion for the Doctor. Yes, she was sort of created for the dads, as they say. She was kind of the skimpy Raquel Welch in the poster for, what was it, 1 million years BC, the poster that's in Shawshank
Oh
Redemption.
yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, that's basically Leela's costume, right? So it's like the BBC or the Doctor Who production team saying, "Hey, we're going to increase adult viewership," by which they mean heterosexual male viewership, who are certainly not going to turn the TV off after the sports show Grandstand that was always on before Doctor Who. They're going to stay. They're going to stick around for the skin. So Louise Jameson took the role of Leela, which could have been just completely two-dimensional, made it her own. She is so ill-served by this story, even with her time with the Shibogans.
Well,
And
I was going to say. The time with Shibogans is great and kind of makes up for the rest of it in that she gets to step up and essentially be a leader for these folks. And there's good moments. I mean, like the thing where she is trying to train other people on how to shoot a bow, but also is showing them that she can do it and sort of rallies them all up. And I would have liked to see a little more there, but she seems to make it clear to them that the stakes in the capital that they've turned their back on still should matter to them. And it doesn't take a lot of convincing, but it's a good moment for her, both as sort of a warrior and a leader and someone who can proactively move the plot forward. So again, you're not wrong about the other parts of it, particularly even though she's not well served by the Doctor telling her to shut up and banishing her, but at the same time, I think that does a really great job of establishing him as somewhere else than what we're used to seeing the Doctor, and potentially working with the bad guys, so keeping you guessing. So even though, like, again, it doesn't serve her character well, it serves his character and the story well. So I'm going to allow that. But then toward the end, yes, it kind of drops off, and then she's just sort of left on Gallifrey. And we should probably talk about that, like the whole romance,
Andred.
that non-existent romance between her and Andred.
Which they. So this was a case where Louise Jameson and the actor who played Andred, Christopher Tranchell, or Chris Tranchell as he's listed in some of the episodes. Good old Chris. They had to basically work it out between themselves to sort of inject some tenderness into the earlier scenes where they're running around together, to try to put in the show what was not in the script. And it was really a case of just, you don't want to call it misogyny, but certainly not listening to women, and not listening in this case to Louise Jameson, who said clearly for months beforehand, "I want to end my time with Doctor Who. This is it. Over. No, done. Ending my association with season 15." And they just didn't believe her. They thought they could talk her out of it right till the last minute. And this was just sort of the backup plan for how she would leave the show.
To be fair, I mean, no one knew what John Nathan Turner was going to do, but apparently JNT had offered, I think we might have mentioned this on Logopolis, but had offered to have her come back and help with the transition to Peter Davison in that final season. And she was like, "Well, that'd be great. Can I come for just one story?" He was like, "No, I want you there for the whole season, or at least most of it." And she was like, "Well, then it's off." But then she actually says in the commentary on Invasion of Time that she would have made probably a different decision if she had to do it over again, and that she probably would do it. So in other words, she clearly is a bit ambivalent about Doctor Who, right? Like, it's not like she hates the show. She's obviously been well treated by it. And she's done a lot of Big Finish audios. She's like a lot of actors who were in the classic series have become great contributors and ambassadors for the show, and that I'm super grateful about that.
Yeah.
All that
Certainly,
said,
Big Finish would be a lot poorer without
Yeah.
Leela existing going
I
forward.
think
But
the right way to do this, you're dead on, is like do something more along the lines like they did with Jenna Coleman in I forget the name of the Christmas. I think it's Last Christmas.
Right, Last
and
Christmas.
write it in such a way that it's a natural endpoint, but you can always reverse it. You can always, in other words, it's easier to do it the other way. Like write it in such a way that they're going to leave and then don't have them leave, as opposed to write it in a way that is just normal and then it's a sudden departure at the end. That's like, what?
Or even a Tegan like situation, like Tegan at the end of Time Flight would have been a good template for this. But they also, so she did want to be killed off. She did want to die a heroic death, and this could have been Adric years before Adric, right? Speaking of that, last Tom Baker season and first Davison season, we could have had Leela nobly sacrificing herself to save Gallifrey from the Sontarans.
And I guess they hadn't had anybody who's a companion die since Dalek's Master Plan at this point, I believe.
Yeah, since Sarah Kingdom,
so I think, it would have been a lot for them to sort of alter the show in that way, in that, like, I think at that point that it had been pretty established that companions come and companions go, but the whole dying thing, that's a bit extreme. So I could definitely see them turning it down. What I will say is that I think there is a much more natural romance to have played up here between Leela and a character, and it's not Andred, obviously, it's Nesbin, the leader of the Shobogans. I mean, they really hit it off when they meet, and he has a tremendous respect for her. Like like she wins him over like almost immediately, and he's like, "Yes, you're a warrior. I like you." And if they had played those in sort of a more romantic way and a little more eyes between the two of them, I think that would have been a much easier sell to the audience by the end. And you would have had to write more for Nesbit in those last two episodes. But that I would have bought it. Whereas with Andred, I mean, you're totally right. They'd have a tiny bit of meet cute stuff with the knife earlier, which again also makes no sense if you zoom in and like, well, why is he letting her have a knife sometimes and not other times? And the one moment that I think does stand out for me is like, okay, there's a little tenderness between them, is actually when Andred gets shot in episode 6 or so, and Leela tends to his wound. So you can sort of believably get a little bit of that kind of Florence Nightingale effect, as I think Doc Brown describes it in the original Back to the Future. So, it's a tiny bit there, but it really is just whiplash at the end. It's like, oh yeah, I like this guy. Not just I get you could like this guy, but to the point where you want to stop traveling with the Doctor and stay here. Like what?
Right, and you you do need to point to the opposites attract idea between them, because you need some way to explain why this woman who's very much into living the savage life, the original lifestyle, would fall for this guy who's like super aristocratic.
I'll add one more thing that would have sold it, and again, I think you could have even sold it this way without any romantic relationship. Excuse me, but I think it was the fact that the Doctor is so dismissive of her early on, clearly has not taken her into his confidence, banishes her. Basically, he does not treat her well in those first few episodes, and essentially kind of treats her like, as you said, as a savage. And I'm just going to use her as a pawn in my plot to get rid of the Vardans. She is totally entitled, in my view, to be utterly angry and unforgiving to him about that. And if they wanted to play that up, that would have also been a good way for those two to part ways.
Exactly, very, very Kill the Moon style scene you can imagine there at the end with Leela just berating the Doctor for kind of how he's treated her, at several points throughout their entire time together. But I guess that's sort of like maybe the enmity between Tom Baker and Louise Jameson might have spilled out a little too much if they actually filmed it that way. It would be a little less acting, a little more, group therapy for the for the cast.
Well, there's that moment in
it's-
episode 1 where he says, Leela, tell K9 to tell you to shut up. And she kind of does, but then K9 actually pulls out the blaster. Like, it's like, hold on, like what is happening? You're just like that. I would be extremely pissed at the Doctor for like, when you sicked your dog on me? Like, what are you doing? K9's my friend. Don't do that.
Yeah, and they are friends enough that K9 stays with her, which, by the way, I don't think you needed to do. Like, yes, they wanted to upgrade the model, but why couldn't you just have the Doctor the start of the Ribos operation be like, yeah, I did a few modifications to K9, like I upgraded the actual dog. Instead of like, I'm going to build a new Mark II from scratch, which first of all begs the question of where did he get it? Did he nip off to the 50th century to pick up a Mark II kit? And who is he? Yeah, who is he laughing at there? Like, why the fourth wall breaking? It's the first time it's happened since since the Feast of Stephen, right? The famous fourth wall breaking with William Hartnell. Which is interesting because we did sort of call out Orphan 55 for almost breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the audience. And here it is, some full-on smashing it, mad.
Yeah, I didn't mind it too much. Just because it's like a final seed and it's almost like extraneous. The K9 stuff, I don't want to get too far into it, but this is a turning point for K9 because it's Mark 1 to Mark 2. I don't get it in that, like, what's upgraded after the Mark II? You know what I mean? Like, is it a more powerful weapon? Did it go faster? Is it a better prop? No, and no. So I don't know why they keep doing it. I also feel like the fact that there are all these marks for different versions of K9 without a distinction and with seemingly the same memories, it makes the sacrifices K9 occasionally makes. You think about School Reunion even. Like, meaningless. Like, well, we'll just build another one. We'll just get, no problem. K9 can always be rebuilt, can always be reassembled, and I'm it's not great. It's like, again, I'll make a Star Wars reference for you, like in The Rise of Skywalker when 3PO gets rid of his memories, and you think, oh wow, that's going to be a big deal. Oh no, not restored. Like 15 minutes later or whenever it is, it's like, okay, why
totally
bother?
Reversed. Indeed, why bother? All right, so I feel like I want to talk about one more thing before we move on to the 4 questions. I don't know if you have other stuff you want to talk about, but let me just rant for a little bit and just get this out of the way. The TARDIS interior, I mentioned this at the top of the show. Like this was sort of famous for chasing through the TARDIS, and I'd always imagined that as taking place in studio sets that look something like they look in Castrovalva, right? All of that TARDIS interior stuff that we saw in Davison's first season. That was my assumption. Now, I'd heard there was a swimming pool in there. Okay, fine. They've probably done it up as like a TARDIS-y swimming pool with roundels around the edges and, make it look Gallifrey. Nope. It's just a frickin' swimming pool. And it's, and it's brick. And it's brick and there's this one scene where they like come up through a door onto some stairs where they go down and they exit the scene and then they come up. It looks like they've almost rerun the entire film, right? You just go back to the beginning of that particular scene and they're running down the same stairs again, almost like they're trapped in a time loop. And it just doesn't work. And I've often on the show said that Doctor Who is best treated as a fever dream. Which is true of some parts of Invasion of Time, but other parts are just like a crappy dream. I don't know if you've ever like dreamed a Doctor Who story, and you wake up and you're like, during the dream you're like, wow, that was fantastic, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, the Doctor was in this hospital corridor and it was made of brick, and it's just like you realize once you wake up that actually it wasn't a very good story. It's that kind of dream. It doesn't even rise to the level of fever dream, and there's just all of the weird choices, like not even the not even the swimming pool, which, by the way, I was thinking of because they throw in a scene in episode 1 where Leela is just randomly going for a swim. I think just to establish that the TARDIS has a swimming pool, not even clear that that's where it is. But like, yes, let's get another Leela skin scene in this story by having her go for the swim. It's just so bizarre. But it's also like there's so many weird choices in the sets on Gallifrey, like those little chairs in the corridors that they keep running past, these little plastic chairs. What the hell? And they're for tiny people, they're kids' chairs.
Yeah, no, I just thought of it. They were like chairs from a children's museum or something. I think I might have even seen them in a children's museum once. Yeah, so the TARDIS stuff, I'm a little split on. I really love the idea of like, let's do a chase in the TARDIS. And and I actually didn't mind the gag of going through the same place, maybe in opposite directions or even the same direction, and saying it's a different place. And the Doctor, it sort of emphasizes the Doctor's familiarity with the TARDIS, in that like he knows this is whatever storage room 4B instead of 5A or whatever he says. That was all good. I really wish it was a little more. They did even more, right? Again, it's more the timing and what they had access to, and they had like a couple of locations, and they did the best they could. Whereas I would have loved to see like super eclectic stuff. Like suddenly feel like you're at the top of an office tower. Then again, you're in that sort of grungy factory basement. Then you're in a library. Then you're in a museum. Then you're in a store. Then you're in a cloister, right? Like, and all this stuff. Like, I like that idea. It definitely contrasts a bit to the John Nathan Turner era, where it became much more homogenized. Every room had roundels. Every room kind of looked the same and had obviously just rejiggered sets. Which again, like you could argue they're both sort of world building, but world building in different ways. And I would say that the Nathan Turner version is a little more left brain, a little more concrete. It's a little more like, oh, this is I can wrap my head around this, which I like for certain reasons. But I really like that bit in this, in that it's emphasizing almost the infinite nature of the TARDIS very, very early.
Yeah.
So very cool. I mean, relatively early. It's not that early at this point in the show, but my problem with this, and to some extent the previous episode, is the Sontarans aren't really doing anything. There's just not. There's a bit of back and forth, and this is a problem to some extent with the whole story, in that you don't really get a lot of the rest of Gallifrey and how they're reacting to this. You get a little bit with like Andred and the guards, and the guard on guard action with them sort of zapping each other, the ones the loyal to the Castellan, the ones that are rebelling. I kind of wanted more of that, and I wanted more of like, how are the Vardans and the Sontarans going to use Gallifrey and the power of the Time Lords? And you don't quite get that. I mean, the Sontarans, they're wandering through the TARDIS with their guns, and they're shooting through shower curtains or something, and you're just like, is this it? I mean, like, I know they're looking for the Great Key, and they figure, but surely there's other stuff you could be doing, and there's other help you could get pretty quickly rather than just the Castellan and his little sensor thingy, right? It just suddenly feels very low scale for something that's supposed to have the ultimate stakes.
Yes.
Yeah, at least until the DMAT gun gets assembled. And again, even when that happens, you have this gun, and it even though it's talked about as like this super weapon, it's really just a gun that essentially disintegrates things. And that's it, and then it disappears at the end conveniently. And Rassilon, apparently his wisdom has erased the Doctor's memory, and it's all just kind of wrapped up in this bow, and you just really get the impression they didn't know what to do once the Sontarans were revealed. They just like, okay, let's have them chase around a few corridors and wrap it up with a big gun.
Yes, and speaking of props, we do have possibly the worst prop. I'm going to nominate it for worst prop in the history of Doctor Who, the Great Key. Now, I know that the joke is that it could sort of it can fit in, like it's kind of a holy grail like thing, right? It's supposed to be kind of minimalist and hide in plain sight, except it isn't actually hiding in plain sight on the wall of keys. It turns out to be in Barusa's desk. But like, yeah, that's the fact that the Great Key is just like this thing that they bought for 39p at a hardware store. It's just really bad. But yeah, let me stay positive on that. I want to mention the swimming pool scene because it does give us two. Okay, you want to go back to the Great Key?
Let me go back and correct you because the
Okay.
worst prop is not the Great Key. It is a Gallifreyan ping pong ball communications technology that is literally just colored ping pong balls that they
Yes.
put into different places to do things, and you need it's so bizarre. Like, I mean, looking back on that, it was like one of the weird. Like, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to do some weird alien technology and artifact based, and but it just like now it is probably the thing about this episode and that has aged the worst. And there are a lot of things that didn't age well in this episode, but that the Gallifreyan ping pong ball technology, oh my god, no.
I actually, so there are a number of things that are sort of famously bad about this that people like to joke about that I didn't actually mind. The ping pong ball thing didn't faze me. The oh gosh, it's just completely fled my mind. But the Derek Deadman, who plays the Sontaran, the only Sontaran we get to see the face of.
Store,
sort of famously, Store, kind of did him with a. I love it. Did it with a Cockney accent, with sort of a jokey Cockney accent. A lot of people in their reviews are like, "No, I can't even hang with that." Like, no, not an issue for me. Lots of planets have a London, I guess.
Lots of planets have an industrial sector.
Yeah, exactly. Who start talking like this? Yeah, like the Cockney Sontaran. It totally works. But then also the swimming pool scene, like a lot of people like to point out that the one scene where the Sontaran stumbles over a pool chair unintentionally and then intentionally falls really badly down the steps of the swimming pool. I laughed out loud. I laughed so hard at that scene. And I think if this was released today, you would have a looping GIF of that, or GIF if you prefer, of the Sontaran stumble, which would just be epic. It would be legendary. I love it.
Well, you could still make one.
That's true.
Definitely
one more Star Wars reference to throw in. It's kind of like the stormtrooper hitting his head on the Death Star. You know, a scene that people have pulled out of, like, you know, unintentional bad guy comedy.
That stumble, though, man, you just just almost hear the Graham Williams, the director, saying, like, "We have time for another take." And Graham Williams, nope. That's like, okay, wrap it up, guys. That'll have to do.
Basically, cut to Ed Wood, cut to Johnny Depp as Ed Wood, going, "Great, print it. It's perfect." Love that scene. Oh god! But yeah, there's also we should mention Barusa by the swimming pool, reading the Daily Mirror, reading the Daily Mirror with the Titanic being sunk on the front cover, and the Doctor sort of sheepishly saying, "It's nothing to do with me." Which I love. That almost felt very New Who, that sort of hint of a story, of an adventure that we'll never see on screen. But I love the idea that, clearly by saying that, the Doctor is admitting that he did sink the Titanic. So adjust your headcanon accordingly.
But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Barusa. I mean, Barusa here, I think, is the best version of Barusa that we see in all of Classic Who, and he's the most recurring Time Lord, I believe, because we see him as sort of his preachy political self in The Deadly Assassin, which is really good, but he's very one note. You see him again in Arc of Infinity and the Five Doctors, and both of those he's a little more bland. I mean, obviously in the Five Doctors he takes this turn, which is kind of out of nowhere just for the story. So he's not well served here. I think he's great. I mean, he is this really kind of a wise mentor type for the Doctor, and I like his emotional beats just really feel exactly right, in that he's sort of disgusted and annoyed with the Doctor early on, sort of starts to clearly reluctantly, at first, help him, but then once the Doctor sort of unmasks himself and is like, "I'm really working against the Vardans," they become a really good duo. Like Barusa's like,
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have to run him through the system, but is he a companion? he he might be.
Does he take a ride in the? Yeah, they take a ride in the TARDIS at some
Around the
point.
TARDIS. I
Yeah,
don't know if they ever
yeah,
travel in time, the two of them, but
yeah.
you have to presume Brusa has traveled in time. But regardless,
But yeah,
uh,
you definitely get buddy comedy vibes from the two of them. I would love to see a Tom Breaker, John Arnett vehicle of them traveling through time together. But yeah, there are 4 different actors who play Barusa in the 4 different appearances in the classic series, and John Arnett's version is widely thought of as the best. And you can certainly see why. There's sort of the long-suffering dryness of his comments towards the Doctor, as you would towards a sort of, too smart for his own good ex-pupil. With whom you still have a grudging amount of respect for. Yeah, I really felt that. I totally got it.
yeah, no, I really like the scene where Barusa and the Doctor's explaining how he has been trying, essentially shielding his thoughts from the Vardans and sort of the randomness of it. And they have that great little exchange where Barusa doesn't get it, and Tom Baker's just, the Doctor is just shrugging, like, yeah, you don't get it. And he kind of realized, I love his self-awareness. Like, even though he's been put upon so much, he realizes, oh yeah, like they would see right through me if I thought that way. Okay, I've really got to get it together. Like, and I like that he does get it together. And notwithstanding what happens with the 5 Doctors, like by the end of the show, you are thinking, oh yeah, this is the guy who should probably be in charge of. You haven't seen many Time Lords at that point, but it's like, yeah, give the presidency to him.
Yep, Barusa for president. Sign me up. Matching funds will be provided in energy pills. Yeah. I'm totally a Barusa fan.
Yeah, I
Bring
have
it
to
on.
wonder how that particular coronation went. That's a fair question, but we have other questions that we need to answer before we can
Yes, we
elude the
do.
invasion of time, and those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question: why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, I already mentioned in the top of the show, I really think the randomizer is testing us and testing our faith in the show, or certainly testing my faith, and in this case, kind of testing my faith in Tom Baker, because I'd not seen this one. I'd not seen a lot of the kind of the. So the comedy really got ramped up in the following season, right? Season 16,
Right.
and I've not seen a lot of that. We did go to the Androids of Tara. We saw it a little bit, but we kind of raised this question in Destiny of the Daleks, basically shadow written by Douglas Adams, of how much comedy is too much comedy. I mean, Destiny of the Daleks is like frickin' Hamlet compared to this. It's so serious. Well, you can make a Hamlet comparison here, of course, to the Doctor pretending to be mad, but yeah, in terms of the level of comedy in a lot of this, like it definitely goes a bit too far. And there was a conversation within the BBC based on Invasion of Time, where the head of drama was like, brought Graham Williams in, was like, hey, I'm afraid that this is just tipping over a little too much in the comedy direction. Can we rein it in a bit? So yeah, when it's too much comedy for the BBC, and then they
Douglas Adams.
yeah, exactly. And then it got even worse.
Notably, we didn't mention this, but the writing credit here is David Agnew, just as City of Death was. David Agnew, just obviously a pseudonym for people who shouldn't be writing.
Well, which is weird. You wouldn't,
because of the rules. Let me clarify, not because necessarily the quality. Because City of Death, very well reputed episode written by Douglas Adams, but he was the script editor, was not allowed to be a writer. Same thing here.
Which is so weird to hear it in our era of showrunners, right? It's like the idea that Stephen Moffat or RTD would have to disguise the episodes that they wrote as written by David Agnew. Wow, David Agnew would be responsible for more Viscount bangers than any other writer in the history of the show. We'd be screaming for David Agnew at conventions. Yeah.
In this case, it was Anthony Reed and Graham Williams were the script editor and producer who threw this together.
Yes, so that's my main randomizer take, which is that it's every time we ask for a Viscount banger, it's taking us in the opposite direction, and it is sorely testing our faith. Although maybe not yours so much.
Probably not mine so much. But my thought on the connections the randomizer is making here. So in the Smugglers, which we've just done, there is a very good scene in episode 4 about the Doctor speaking about his moral obligation. And it's probably the first time in the series he explicitly states it, because I think he's sort of just starting to form it from his adventures subsequent to Unearthly Child. And now he strongly feels he has a moral obligation to do the right thing and not just run away from trouble. And here, if you think about what the Doctor's doing, he's very proactively targeting a dangerous entire race of beings and fooling them into thinking he's working for them so he can get rid of them. If you look at it, he's really being far more proactive than he usually is about who's the bad guy and hatching a plan to deal with them. Honestly, you could extrapolate from this a little bit that he's kind of a little bit becoming Time Lord Victorious 30 years early.
Yeah.
In that he's really trying to be this sort of master chess player with galactic threats. And not to overread into it, but the whole thing with Rassilon erasing his memory at the end, I think probably has more to do with that than the actual events of this episode.
Interesting.
Calm down, Doctor. Stop believing too much in your own PR. Your moral obligation doesn't extend to what could be interpreted as genocide, if you think about it, because now arguably a time loop maybe is literally the loophole that Time Lords use to get out of that genocide charge, because technically they're not dead. They're just circling in the same moments in time over and over and over. So maybe genocide doesn't apply, but I mean, just getting rid of the entire Vardan race, I mean, holy cow.
I'm sure that, under the Shadow Proclamation, that might count as torture, being stuck in a time loop. And we've seen the Doctor do it before in the Claws of Axos, right? That's what he does with the Axons, sticks them in a time loop. It is, we'd have to have a serious discussion about whether that counts as torture. But yes, I think you're right. The randomizer is definitely playing up this, the question between, we have the two poles of the Doctor's behavior, represented by the Smugglers, where he realizes he has a moral obligation, and Kill the Moon, where he just pieces out of his moral obligation to assist humanity at that point. And it's kind of bouncing back and forth. And here we've gone to one of the more extreme examples of the Doctor solving the trolley problem by, definitely yanking that lever on the trolley and making it head towards the lesser number of deaths. But yes, also trapping the inhabitants of the trolley on a time loop in the process. Very bizarre.
Yeah, time loops, man. They're the Time Lord version of the capital punishment without having to do capital punishment. I think it's again a very appropriate thing for such a feckless society to rely on.
Oh my God.
I think it'd be good to explore that more.
Yeah, it would be. And I think, yes, in our regular segment, RTD Call Us, definitely a story that explores the question of are time loops torture? Like we've now seen a time loop more extensively in the show than ever before with Eve of the Daleks. But we haven't explored the moral implications of time loops. I'd love to see that. Yeah. I'd love to see the question of, are you actually torturing these people for all time?
Wow, sounds like a hell of an evil plot if they are.
Yeah.
But we have to talk
Great
about
segue.
our second question, which is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
All right, so is the evil plot that of the Vardans, or is it that of the Sontarans who are using the Vardans?
Yeah, I think we got to do two versions. So for the Vardan being the evil plot, if that's their thing, so for that to succeed, I think the Doctor's plan essentially doesn't work. For whatever reason, with K9 using all the Time Lord artifacts to find the Vardan homeworld and time loop it, there's some incompatibility maybe he didn't foresee. And then the Vardans end up busting into the office before he can do anything. And they would just kill him, right? They'd just kill him and the Shobogans and Leela, and they'd rule Gallifrey for a few minutes until the Sontarans arrive. And then I guess they'd fight. They'd fight, and whoever wins gets Gallifrey. Is that how that would work?
Right. Yeah. And they're not really going to have much advantage of seeing into the minds of the Sontarans, because the Sontarans really kind of wear their minds on their sleeves. There's not a lot going on in there. So yeah. I would also love to see, by the way, the Vardans plot succeeding by them sort of superseding the lead issue in the same way that the Cybermen kind of got over that whole gold thing. They tell us in The Power of the Doctor, right? Yeah, of course we evolved past that whole problem with gold. What a ridiculous notion. Love to see the Vardans just come into the Doctor's lead line chamber and be like, "What? Oh, you thought we could still be blocked by lead? You might want to update the Wikipedia entry on Vardans, Doctor." We got past
with that helmet, Andred. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's the Sontarans' evil plot, then they blow everything up, right? Because that's what Storr does at one point, or is it about to do?
He decides that he's going to destroy the entire galaxy with a grenade. But I guess what that does, it blows up the Eye of Harmony, and because of the way the Time Lords have set it up, I guess, is it blows up the whole galaxy. So
the
we'll have to take
whole galaxy.
Yeah, and essentially destroys a Gallifrey. And
we are in the same. We're in the same galaxy as Gallifrey, right? I'm not sure if that's
ever been clear. And honestly, the dialogue here suggests maybe not, because there's the bit with the jelly babies we were talking about. The Doctor tells them they're from Earth. He says, "Oh, that's Sol 3 and Mutter's Spiral."
Mutter's Spiral, yes.
Seems to imply that's not the galaxy they happen to be in. I suppose it could be, but then why would you need to specify the galaxy if they're both in the same galaxy?
Okay, according to the Wikia, TARDISfandom.com, Mutter's Spiral is designation for the star cluster, and the Gallifrey is in the same galaxy as Earth. Apparently, that was established by the TV movie.
Oh, interesting.
But then again, the TV movie also said that the Doctor was half human. So, who even knows? Another example.
Constellation of Cerberus. Which is it? I've been looking for it. Someone tell me in the sky where Cerberus is.
Yes, please.
But anyway, if he blows up the whole galaxy, I mean, it really depends if the Daleks are also in this galaxy, because then because if they're not, then it's like, Daleks, the universe is yours. If not, I mean, it's a big reboot for the cosmos, I guess. Maybe the comes out on top.
Maybe maybe you know what? You know what's on Gallifrey this whole time? We haven't even talked about it. The moment. It's technically there. Like, why wouldn't the Sontarans go and explore that instead of there? Or also, conversely, why do we even need the moment if there's a hand grenade that can blow up the whole galaxy?
Well, why didn't Rassilon and everyone else grab the DMAT gun back in the new series and just start blasting away at the Daleks? A couple shots from the demon. It raises you from time, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Daleks are a little time immune.
Oh no, Doctor Who canon is inconsistent. What will we do? Yes, yeah, okay. Okay. Evil plot succeeds. Galaxy gone. Possibly, probably including Earth. No more Doctor Who. No more anything.
Okay, high stakes indeed. Oh my! All right. Well, someone might be affecting these stakes in the background, and that leads us to our third question, which is: where is the Clara Splinter?
Now,
as everyone knows, Clara Oswald splintered in time at the end of the Name of the Doctor throughout the Doctor's timeline. And she is probably somewhere in the background of every episode. In fact, she was shown to be in the background of this episode because they used footage from the Invasion of Time and
they did
in one of the clips in that episode. She is shown to be in the background of one of the times the Doctor is walking through Gallifreyan corridors. And it's actually, I believe they reused the moment where Leela is behind him. And the camera for a moment stays on the opening that he just walked away from. Leela pops out. But in the Name of the Doctor footage, it's actually Clara Oswald who pops out in more of a Sarah Jane type outfit.
Okay. Which brings up the issue that we haven't mentioned, by the way, of why did Sarah Jane have to be abandoned before the Deadly Assassin, whereas Leela can just go right into Gallifrey? I guess it's the difference between, the Doctor being summoned and the Doctor in his potentially nefarious scheme with the Vardans. But it's not even mentioned.
Just wanted to ditch her. You get a little too close.
Yeah. Sorry, babe. Can't take you back to see the family. Sorry, it's a little too early in our relationship. Yeah, one of those moments. So what is Clara doing there? She's there in a Sarah Jane outfit. Could she be the architect who is creating the lead-lined room, which the Doctor says, he gives all these instructions for the interior decoration that he wants for the room. And basically, the interpretation of it. Oh, you want it to look like Earth architecture, basically. Yes, that's it. So maybe Clara Oswald. Clara is actually drafted in from Earth. She's wearing a Sarah Jane outfit because that's what the Time Lords think all Earth people who aren't allowed access to Gallifrey dress in, and she's just sort of conforming to type, and and then she kind of ensures that there's lead in that chamber, or she is suggesting to Barusa maybe that the voice print of using a voice print is terrible, or whatever it is that he says would be a good piece of security. She's his security consultant. I don't know what else. What else we got?
I had a couple. One is that she is some Gallifreyan engineer, or masquerading as one, who has access to essentially the crown jewels, and she is ensuring that all of this Gallifreyan artifact technology is canine compatible. Whether it's
Canine Mark 1 compatible.
Exactly. It's like you got to make sure your crown of Rassilon, or whatever the stuff is, the scepter of Rassilon, the sash of Rassilon, all of it can interface super quickly with 50th century robot dogs. And
right.
That ensures that the Vardans are taken care of. So the other idea I had is that off screen, whenever Leela's off screen or Andred's off screen, she's whispering in their ear, talking about how great the other person is, and that
she's a yenta. Yes,
you guys would look great together. You guys are meant for each other. Something.
She's taking pictures of the two of them, posting them to Gallifrey and Instagram, making sure they get lots of likes. Like, look how many people look. Yeah, she's probably inventing a Landred hashtag or and Andrila or she's like, look, everyone's mad for you guys. You'd be a great couple. Come on, I've given you a hashtag. Do it.
Yeah.
Stay on Gallifrey, Leela. You know the Doctor hates you.
Yeah. Yep.
And you know what? Take his robot dog. That'll be the ultimate revenge. Take the dog.
Oh wow. Yeah, girl power.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. She's having late night chats with Leela around the campfire. Maybe in Shebogan. Yep. Love it.
All right, settled. And what we need to settle now is, of course, our final question. The only question, the one that matters most for the Invasion of Time. What did we think of this episode? The Pull to Open rating system has 5 ratings. They are the Dalek, which is what we give for a good episode of Doctor Who, the Ogron, which is for a not so good episode of Doctor Who, the Professor Hater, which is perhaps not a good episode, but at least they tried something. At least we learned something. Or the Viscount Banger, the coveted rating, which we give to only the best of the best that Doctor Who has to offer. And finally, the 5th rating, rarely used, Fixed Point in Time, which is an episode that is beyond rating. We cannot rate this episode. We cannot judge it for various reasons.
Yes, usually reasons of nostalgia, which I could imagine I might give this a fixed point in time had I been watching the series at that point. But I think it's another clear-cut case of a Professor Hater. Absolutely clear-cut. It's not great. It's kind of a mess. By the way, it's a mess also because the Doctor doesn't even give up the presidency at any point. Like, it just leaves Gallifreyan politics in tatters and heads off. Not even a moment of saying, "Hey, you could choose my old friend Colonel Barusa here. He'd be a lot better leader than I am." Just throwing a line like that. So there's a lot of a mess, but we definitely learned some things. We definitely learned what the TARDIS interior should not look like. We learned that maybe the Vardan threat didn't sustain 4 episodes, and maybe you should have brought in the Sontarans sooner. Yeah, I feel like there were learnings all round. You know, that it shouldn't. BBC learned that Doctor Who should not have this much comedy in it, even though that was a battle they were going to have to continue to fight. But I sense that you disagree, Pete.
I disagree, sir. This is a Dalek. I like this episode, and I'll tell you why. It's like I said, zoomed out. I think it's amazing. Like I love that they went there. They went to back to Bob Holmes Gallifrey, and they explored it and got it right. Particularly with 2 great performances from Bruce and the Castellan. The manic stuff with the Doctor that sort of keeps you guessing, and Tom Baker does really, really well. You have this stuff with the Gallifreyan defenses that they explore and super weapons. You have the double invasion, which is pretty neat. Again, I think there's so much here that just really works for me structurally that it doesn't even matter to me that the Vardans are made of tinfoil or the Sontarans didn't have any plans, and there are a lot of details like the TARDIS interior that weren't so great. I think the difference here, to point out a recent Professor Hater for me, with Kill the Moon, where it had big ambition, but got some of the major beats wrong and structurally got some stuff wrong. Here, the framework is perfectly intact. It's fine. It's like, yes, it was rushed. Yes, it looks cheap sometimes. Yes, like some of the plot details don't really work. I don't care. Like, this was a very cool, ambitious episode that gets a lot of things right about Gallifrey, and I'm giving it a Dalek.
Wow. Okay. Well, if there was a Vardan in our rating system, that's what I would give it. Like the idea that we could give a Vardan rating, and then the Vardan rating has turned into a Sontaran. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree on this one. I think we both agree that it was ambitious. Um, the execution of that ambition, I think, is where we differ. But that's fine. We have many split decisions here on Pull to Open. But there is one decision that is not split, and it is the decision of the randomizer on where we go next.
Indeed.
Pete, would you tell the good people out there in podcast land what the randomizer is?
The randomizer is definitely not a dog from the 50th century. It is a device that constitutes two different elements. One is the Codex, the Pull to Open Codex, a list of every single episode of Doctor Who in the right order, chronological order, and
Every single story, we should say. Yeah.
Everything is story, yes. And the second part is the random element, which we like to call random.org.
Yes, which I have pulled up now. I am standing at the controls of the executor, aka random.org, which will generate a true random number based on atmospheric noise when the shields are lowered around planet Earth. Atoms bouncing around in the atmosphere, much better way to create randomness than algorithms which only guess at true randomness. It's a big problem in computer science that has been solved with atmospheric noise. So that's what we like to do. And Pete, in the Codex, Pete has the current list of how many stories are left. And I will plug that number into random.org. Pete, what is the number?
Now that I have ticked off the invasion of time, that number is 223.
Wow. All right. Getting closer to that magical 200 number, at which point we will have done a third of all of the stories in Doctor Who history. Now, so between number 1 and number 223, I will hit the generate button after we give the randomizer some challenges. And I'm going to go first on this one. Because my plan to get us to a Viscount banger did not work by confronting it head on, I'm going to go for the apparent oppositional defiance disorder that the randomizer has. I'm going to say, take us to the worst ever Doctor Who story. Take us to something truly awful that makes Invasion of Time look like Shakespeare.
The problem is the randomizer knows you so well. I think it can see right through your plot. Just like you, if you were a shimmering Vardan
in a chair.
Okay, I'm just going to ask, because yes, some of the TARDIS scenes here, though a good idea, were not executed that well. I'd love to go to another TARDIS heavy episode that is done well. I'll even just
maybe Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. I can't even remember whether that goes well or not.
I'd even take the Edge of Destruction, which is a very early episode that is all the time. So I'm going to do that.
Right. Okay.
So now I think it's time. I think we gotta.
It's time. Give me a countdown.
Random. Here we go. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Excellent.
165. We're in New Who.
We are in New Who. Oh my God. It is the Doctor's wife.
Oh my God. It listened to you.
It listened to me.
It listened to you. It's TARDIS Interior.
To you, unless it was doing sort of an opposite day, I think.
I think, I don't want to. I don't want to tip my hand too early on this, but I do have to say this is one of my favorites. So this
is a favorite of a lot of people. Famously written by Neil Gaiman. I believe it's his second that he did, right? because he did.
No, I think it's the first. He did
that's right.
Nightmare
After this.
That one that was famously squashed down from 2 episodes. But this is the sort of the platonic ideal of Neil Gaiman writing for Doctor Who. This is perfect in every respect.
Amazing. Well, I'm really looking forward to that. And folks, I hope you are too, when we come back next time with a commentary on The Doctor's Wife, perhaps with a guest in tow. So stay tuned for that. Folks, this has been Pull to Open. It is a podcast. Podcasts are great things to subscribe to if you have not done that already. And if you've already subscribed on perhaps a podcast app, feel free to go over to YouTube sometime. Find us at youtube.com/pull to open and subscribe there as well. It'll really help the show. We're on social all over the place. We're on TikTok at Pull to Open, Twitter at Pull to Open 63, Instagram Pull to Open 63, and Facebook Pull to Open 63. The absolute best thing you can do besides following us on all those places and rating the show and reviewing the show is sharing the podcast with a friend. Surely you know someone who likes Doctor Who or should like Doctor Who. Go ahead. This is the podcast.
Perhaps
on board.
Perhaps in the spirit of our next episode, share it with your spouse.
There it is. Spouses of the universe unite and come on back for The Doctor's Wife next week.
See you then, guys.